Hey everybody, it's Steve from Still Working It Out, Life on the Road. How's it going? So by the way, my full name is Steve Underwood, in case you didn't know that. And the only reason I say that is because you can look me up on Facebook and you can look me up on Substack. Um, I'm not looking for money or subscriptions or anything like that, but if you want to see into the things that I write, uh, it's I was publishing it on Facebook, but that was kind of annoying to everybody because the stuff is too long for that. But on Substack, I put a lot of research into some of the different things that I write, and so some of it's helpful and interesting. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I am a little nuts. So it's mildly entertaining, if not informative. So anyway, Steve Underwood, Substack, Facebook, YouTube, whatever you want to do, it's all good. And hey, like and subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube. And it doesn't help me out. I'm not getting money for this. I hear that people do that, but it's not happened to me or anything. But if you like and subscribe, then if you're enjoying this content, the stuff I make, it's easier for you to see. And when I make new videos, you get alerted about them right away, so that nothing's out of context. That's my understanding about that. So my channel here is, in case you didn't catch that, is Still Working on It, Life on the Road. So I'm 57 years old, and I just barely figured out what I wanted to be when I grew up. I've tried to do 8 million different things, some to some minor success, and some to complete failure. And I've gone to college 3 different times and then decided what I was doing was not what I wanted to do, and I was wasting my time and energy. And in America, money. The last iteration of college was started during COVID in 2019 because of some really good advice from a friend that had received a master's degree at this one place and in this one particular way. And I am endlessly grateful for him telling me that. Thanks, Jeremy Light. You rock, bro. I took his advice and told my wife about it, and she got both her master's degrees before I got mine. She's way more diligent than I am. She got 2 master's degrees. Now, we had talked about it a lot, and what Jeremy had recommended to me is that I get a master's in business administration, so an MBA. So Karen and I, my wife, were talking about this a lot, and I, as usual, I did the never-ending amounts of research in it and found out that it's basically a license to steal. And you're not forced into doing business stuff specifically. You could venture out into anything, but that really a business degree helps you understand how to spin plates. It helps you understand how to organize things to a larger degree than just putting your closet together so you can find your shoes. Then after that, organization is the beginning of everything. Organization is the foundation to every house. How you put the bricks down and all that stuff for your foundation will determine how well the house stands, right? Well, a business degree is where everybody should start, in my opinion. Even if your disciplines and your love is in science, biology, or something like that, it should always start, in my opinion, with an MBA. Because after that, you'll be able to put together all of your education and all of your projects together in ways that help each other. It took me a long time to figure that out. And I only figured it out because I've listened to other people who have been successful with it. My friend Jeremy he's the smartest guy I know. My wife is the smartest woman I know. Luckily, I'm surrounded by those people. I have no idea, other than the sheer entertainment factor, I have no idea why they would want to ever say 2 things to me. I'm not brilliant or good, so I don't know. I am like a pet monkey. I told my wife this. I mean, I've known her since 1985, and I fell in love with her at the time. I didn't know what it was. I had no idea. She was the first girl I ever cared about in any serious way at all. But I thought it was nuts because she was already with another boy, and I wasn't about to try to steal her because that's not how I was raised. And I admired the fact that she was very, very loyal, even though I didn't even know him. He went to a different school than us. And she stayed with him, she got married to him, and she left town with him. And the whole time between 1985 and 1988, when she left, I was just hopelessly, madly in love with her, and I didn't even know that. I just didn't understand why I was obsessing. And that's what it was. In my ridiculous, silly, youthful mind, I didn't think of it in terms of love, and that didn't seem very manly to me at the time. I thought it as in terms of obsession, that I was obsessed with her. Some people call things like a crush or whatever, which sounds very, very temporary and all that. And I realized I was barking up the wrong tree, you know, I mean, and she wasn't interested in me that way at all. We were good friends, but she was not romantically interested in me. She had a boyfriend, and that's where her romance thoughts went. Romance thoughts, and so she and I were friends, but we had several friends that were kind of a group of people. I didn't think she noticed me really at all, any more than any of the other ones. I wasn't in that group of friends because of her. We were already in that group of friends, and I figured out that there was something really different about her in the beginning. Then, as we were in that group of friends, and I was new to the area, by the way, always. I was raised by gypsy people. I just learned over the next probably year how admirable and how different she was than everybody, not just girls, but just everybody. We were in a small town in Iowa. You know, the town we lived in had probably 5,000 people. She was in a class ahead of me, even though we were the same age, other than she's like a month older than me. She was in a class ahead of me. And each of our classes had probably around, I don't know, maybe 200 people, if that. It's a very small school. And, you know, everybody knew everybody's business kind of thing, which is something I totally was not interested in. I've always been a loner my entire life. The fact that I was interested in one girl, or just really any girl, was kind of amazing. You know, for me, it was a new territory. But, you know, I look back at it and say, okay, well, I was 16. You know, boys get interested in girls and just can't stop being interested in them no matter what. And it's all chemistry. So that was pretty much it. But I dated 2 or 3 other girls because I realized I was obsessed with somebody that was inappropriate, you know. And so, you know, I wanted to get out there and be a boy with girls, you know. And we went to the skating rink a lot. The local Fox roller rink was the place to hang out. And as teenagers, me and the girls I hung out with didn't mind necking and kissing right in front of everybody, you know, because we were allowed to at the time. I look back at it now and think how horrifyingly embarrassing it should have been to me. But that's the truth. Yeah, that's my story. So I'm going to cover a couple little things today. If you're not 50 years old yet and things are changing in your life constantly, don't be embarrassed. There's no schedule. We are raised to believe that we need to be on a schedule. Okay? There's good reasons for that. Our parents have been on a schedule since before we were born. You know, when you go to school, you're on a schedule. From the first grade, from kindergarten. We sleep at night. You know, mothers train babies to sleep at night and not in the daytime. They do their best at it. The most annoying things to us in our world is that cats take cat naps. They will not sleep at night. They will sleep all day. Where the sun shines and it's warm, they just curl up. My cats are this way, for sure. Sleep all day, and then all night, because I don't like to shut them out of my room, they constantly wake me up. I have to take Ambien, because if I don't, I will never sleep again, and I'm sure that will kill me. I'm not positive, never tried to not sleep forever. I've been awake easily I've had shifts that I worked for 36 hours before. So I can go a long way with not sleeping. But I'm sure eventually it would kill me. I'm sure that's been proven somewhere. But these cats, man, they are assassins when it comes to that. Little do they know, though, I'm more powerful than them, probably because I'm 10 times their size at least. Probably more than that, really. I'm not very good on the ratios. I'm not a math guy, in case you haven't noticed that about me. So anyway, I told my wife at the time when we got back together later in life at 42 years old. I was in love with her in 1985 when I was 16. Then by the time I was 19, she got, and I had been functioning and everything, my life separately from her other than when we hung out. She left town, got married to a boy who was the first guy leaving town basically, and joined the Army and left. Well, shit. I was already in the military at that time, but in the National Guard, so it was time for me to leave town too. So I made arrangements to leave town myself. I still didn't know that I was in love with her. I knew that I was in pain because I couldn't be around her anymore. I still, like I say, at 19, that's how sad. I guess that's a lack of communication or something. I didn't know that was love. I didn't know. I just thought I was a crazy person for obsessing that much about it. And I was married. I got married a few years later to a person I was not in love with. She knew I wasn't in love with her. She was in love with me, the girl. But she asked me to marry her. I was doing my normal thing, which at the time I kind of had a death wish because I was not happy with how my life was going. None of the plans I had ever made were happening, were even permitted to happen. Nothing that I could do to make my plans work out. Things that I had planned on since I was 8 years old were not working out. For one catastrophic thing that I couldn't control after another. The saying is, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. Because the universe already has plans for you. You can fight it all you want to, but it's not going to happen. That's one piece of wisdom I'm going to impart, which I try to on every one of my videos a little bit to people that are younger, is don't kick yourself in the ass when shit's not going the way you thought it was going to go. When stuff isn't going the way that your parents planned it out for you. Your parents aren't in charge of the universe, and neither are you. You just got to, sometimes, like with my life, you've got to hold on like you're riding a bull and just try your best not to get thrown off. That's life. Anybody that you think isn't doing a good enough job compared to you, first off, mind your own damn business. Second off, we are all in the same boat. We are trying our best just to get through life. All of us. And if their best doesn't look like their best to you, mind your own business. You don't even know what they're going through. You have no idea. You might think you do. You are wrong. They have their own brain, first off, not yours. All their own body chemistry. You could be raised side by side with somebody, and puberty is going to decide different things for you. Who knows why or how? There's some scientists out there that have a great understanding of why and how everything happens. I have big understandings, not tight, intricate understandings. But you'll be better off if you pay attention to your own stuff. Okay? They'll be better off. You'll be better off. Don't live your kids' lives for them. Set them up with all the tools they could possibly use as much as you can later in life, which is not money. Money comes and goes. Money can rot. Money can be stolen. Wisdom. Give them wisdom. Give them raw intelligence. Make sure they do well in school, and don't force anything on them. Make sure they want to. Make them into critical thinkers, not because you force it on them, but inspire them to want to be good critical thinkers. You'll give them every tool they ever need to search for the right path in life if you do that. The trick is, don't live everybody else's life for them and let people be, and enjoy your life and enjoy their contributions to your life. But it's like I told my wife when we first got together at 42, I'm like, you know what? Just so you know, I know myself now. Beware. I'm a pet monkey. I just like a pet monkey. It's really fun to watch for a while. you know, in a group of people. Oh, I'm so funny, you know, and the other people are like, man, nah, I'm glad that guy showed up. But then after a while, after the umpteenth shot, people are like, oh shit, who here is big enough to wrangle Steve, you know? Because I was usually the guy that wrangled people. So when I get like that, who's the one here wants to get together and wrangle Steve into a car and take him home and you know, dart him with a sedative? Nobody? Shit. Then they just have to wait me out. The good news is the shot thing isn't as big as it used to be. It used to be bigger. I was never a big alkie, but I had my moments. So the whole point of that little jaunt was give yourself a break. Your plans are great. You're trying to prepare for things are great. You're trying to stack the deck in your favor. Understandable. Great. But remember that we're only in charge of certain things, you know. I was well on my way. I was diligently doing the right thing from the time that I was 17 on in the military. My military plans had been made already in my head from the time I was 8 years old and had been continuously refined until the time I was 17. And then my dad said, hey, instead of going off to the Army, which he knew in 1 year, that's exactly what I was going to be doing. He said, or the Marine Corps. He said, instead of doing that, what if you joined the National Guard and you stayed local, you know, for the time being? But the way he pitched it to me was, you can join the National Guard now at 17 while you're still a junior in high school and go to basic training and then come home and you have your senior year in high school. Every month you go to a weekend and you learn some stuff about the Army. And then as soon as you graduate high school, you can transfer from the National Guard right into the Army. And I was like, hell yeah, I'll have a leg up. I'll get it done quicker. That was really going along with my plan. That was a great idea that my dad had. I don't know exactly what my dad's ulterior motives were there. But I know he was concerned that I was going to do something rash, like quit school or who knows what, you know. I know he was just trying to help me out. He was a good man and he was a good parent. But after I signed up with the National Guard at 17, went to basic training on the summer right after my junior year, came home and participated in the National Guard all year long during my senior year. And then the next thing was for me was my AIT, which is Advanced Individual Training, for my particular job in the Army National Guard. So it's the exact same school that regular Army goes to. So I went ahead and went to that. And my intention was when I got home that then I would transfer to the Army, and I'd be already up and ahead of where I would have been than if I would have joined the Army right after high school otherwise. Well, shit. I got back home after AIT, 3 months of AIT. A little longer, actually, because the AIT was 3 months, but my reception station took a long time because they had to give me a real special clearance for my job. And that took them forever to track down. And when I got back home, everything's going great. But then the first sergeant said that he couldn't let me transfer yet. I didn't know that was a possibility. I didn't know that was a thing. But he said their troop strength for that unit was a little bit low right then. And as soon as they got up to a certain number, no problem. He could transfer me. All right. So almost a year goes by, and while I was on duty at a National Guard weekend in Des Moines, Iowa, at a place called Camp Dodge, my father, who was also in the National Guard at that time, he was trying to finish. He had gone for a long time, like 14 years in the Navy, and he was trying to finish out his 20 to get his retirement benefits. And at that particular guard drill, he died. He was 50 years old. He had a sudden heart attack out of nowhere. Nobody saw it coming. He was not overweight. He smoked like crazy, but nobody thought about that back then. It was commonly known that it was a carcinogen and all those kinds of things and caused heart disease. Nobody knew what heart disease was. Most people didn't. Anyway, he died suddenly. And for me, the shit hit the fan, you know. My mom was still back at home, and she had 2 kids still in the house that she was raising. My dad had always been the breadwinner in my entire life. And I hate to say it, he was old school. He forbade her from going to going to college and having a regular normal job because and I remember hearing the arguments where that he said stuff like it would make him look bad. It would make him look like he can't provide for his own family. He was really old school. He was really traditionally, you know, man and woman thing. Mom was cool with that, other than the fact that she would like to have her own job, you know. Most of the women my mom and dad hung out with, the families, the women didn't go out and work. They just raised children. And which is not a just. There's a lot to it. And my mom had 5 kids. That was a hell of a job. But anyway, she had never cultivated any life skills other than the ones you can have raising children in your own home. So she started out with a pretty big disadvantage after my dad died. And it was sudden, and there was no savings whatsoever for her to fall back on. Luckily, there was insurance from his job and an insurance from the National Guard, okay? She wasn't left with nothing, but there was a real big gap where that suddenly there was no money. And like I say, no savings. So if my dad wasn't getting his every 2-week paycheck, suddenly there was a problem because they had rent, they had grocery bills and gasoline and all that, electricity, all that. And I was in college, I immediately did the math in my head. I just knew there was no way that the work that I was doing, because I was doing extra hours at the National Guard. I was basically full-time National Guard, but I wasn't making full-time money. There was no benefits for me, like medical benefits, any of that kind of stuff. And at the time, in the late 80s in Eastern Iowa, there was just no work. All the work at factories and stuff here were through temp agencies, and you couldn't get a normal job for a person at my age. You had to either have a lot of experience and you were competing with those people, or you would be working at jobs that were just like convenience stores, McDonald's, stuff like that. Not enough hours or money involved to help anybody, really. I mean, a single person my age could not live on her own, even though rents were just so ungodly cheap compared to what they are now. Still couldn't live on our own and have a piece of junk car and any of that. So I figured it out really, really quickly. I had to quit school, which was being paid for by the GI Bill, so that was messy. And my first sergeant wouldn't let me transfer to the regular Army, because if he would let me transfer to the regular Army, I would have an instant income that I could then send home to my mom. That was not permitted, which is a big bogus thing all by itself. That really threw my life off, that one thing. And then I had to figure out what I was going to do money-wise for my mom and younger siblings. And so I ended up getting 2 or 3 of these temp jobs that were all basically pretty part-time. I'm filling in for people that are on vacations or whatever. And so I was working constantly, you know. It ended up being where that I'd work maybe, 16 hours a day, a little bit more, at 2 different jobs. And then the next day it would be one of those jobs, but another job. And it would kind of rotate like that. It was really weird time. Within a few months, though, my mom started getting her insurance money so that they could be okay to live on their own. And I was only 19. I had never been through anything as challenging as that before. Not only was I traumatized, not just heartbroken, but traumatized by my father's death. My father and I were extremely close. He basically was my only friend. You know, that's how close we were. I was apprenticing with him leading up to that point to be an electrician. He was a master electrician and I was his apprentice. So my schedule was school, National Guard, then when school got over, well, in college, and whatever menial work I could find, and apprenticing with my father. So my social life was pretty narrow. And when my dad died suddenly like that as a shock, it was a surprise from so many angles. My dad was gone, and then I had a legitimate fear that my mom would kill herself because she was 42 and a very emotional person. You know, we're all different. My father had his own issues emotion-wise. He had some kind of natural depressive issues. She had natural anxiety issues. And boy, that was fun to watch. You know, it's like watching gasoline and fire work itself together. They were fun, you know. They were also like watching a cage match at times. I would say wrestling, but wrestling's fake. And their shit was real, man. There was never any blood. Not that kind of fighting. But boy, I'll tell you what. It taught me really early on what lawyers get paid for. The fighting they do is all up here. And that's how my parents did it. Oh, their fighting was amazing. And it was very cerebral. And it was very, very on point. They knew each other's weaknesses and they exploited them constantly. My father really kind of just wanted to be left alone that way. My mom was just a chihuahua when it came to that. But anyway, my early startings was difficult because of that. I from the moment I got out of high school, shit just got weirder and weirder and weirder. And by the time my mom was okay, she ended up doing a bunch of crazy stuff. She wasn't even in the same house anymore because she couldn't stand to be there anymore because she basically was looking for my father all the time. You know, and and I understand the psychology about it and stuff. I've studied it greatly because of that. So confusing for me at the time. And so I started kind of striking out on my own and doing all the different things I wanted to do that the military that my idea of the military wouldn't let me fit into. But now suddenly I was blocked from being able to transfer to the regular army. So I had been by the time I was able to make some changes is 4 years into the time when I signed up for the National Guard. So my contract was for 6 years. I had spent 4 years in the National Guard, and by that time, my mom had now just left town. I helped move her to the West Coast, to the state of Oregon, where we had lived just before we had made the big move out to Iowa. So I came back to Iowa, where all my stuff was, and I was in the National Guard. And finally, the first sergeant continued to tell me that he couldn't let me go. And I'm like, man, this has been 4 years of this. I was told by the recruiter, you know, the guy that's right down the hall, that when I got back from basic training, I would have to finish my high school year and then I would be able to transfer. Now it's 4 years later and you're giving me the same song and dance, which sounds a whole lot like a trap. You know, it sounds a whole lot like a bull. It's that stop loss thing that everybody talks about now, but it was the same thing as at that time. I got stop lost for 4 years. Promised, but it's only in words. And according to the first sergeant, sorry, you should have gotten writing. If I had a nickel for every time I heard that phrase. That's what you get for being too trusting. If it's not in writing, it doesn't mean anything. If it's not in writing, it didn't happen. Even if they're the ones that said it. They said, sorry, did you get it in writing for me? No, because I wouldn't have put it in there. I would tell you all day long because, you know, you're stupid and I'm not. Well, I got hoodwinked because at the time I was stupid and naive. But after 4 years of getting stop lost, I told him I'm leaving. There's no work in that area. I couldn't support myself in that area. And now I was, you know, too old. I was 21. I was too old to be having McDonald's jobs and stuff, and, you know, gas station jobs and crap like that, or just never ending temp work that is killing me. I had already messed up my GI Bill, so I didn't have any money to go to college on. So if I was going to be going to college, I had to do it on my own dime. So beware, if you're doing a GI Bill, don't mess it up. It's really hard to get going again. And I wasn't smart enough for that at the time. I wasn't aware of my rights and and the ability, my ability to organize and to talk to the right people or find the right people. Or how corrupt government is. You know, they love the idea of you paying into shit, but they'll do everything they can not to let you earn the money back or take the money back. So anyway, I did what's called a general discharge under honorable conditions. And I moved to Louisiana, and I started working on towboats in Lake Pontchartrain and the Mississippi River. And I started doing the gypsy thing. I did that for a year, and then I moved to the West Coast where my mom was. I was from there anyway, and so I lived there for a year or so. And had a couple of different girlfriends out there, and then I decided that, and then by that time, my mom, by the very end of that year that I was there, my mom left because she wanted to take my little brother and sister on a vacation to like Hawaii, and then right after Hawaii, they were going to go to England, because her and my dad took a trip there once in 1980, and they loved it. And she basically told me this years later. But there was a pattern to everything she was doing. She was looking for my father, even though he was dead. She never got to see him die. She never even got to see his body. Because, and I didn't realize how horrible this was going to be for her. She didn't object or anything at the time because she was in shock. But my father didn't want to be buried, you know, the normal way. He wanted to be cremated and buried that way, and you know, which is kind of untraditional for people in our family's history prior to my parents. Because of that, they also want, he's only 50 years old, so they wanted to do an autopsy on him. And so before my mother, and the place where he died was 3.5 hours away, and so before my mother was going to get an opportunity to see him, they were going to have performed an autopsy on him. I don't know if you've ever seen an autopsy and the aftermath, but he wouldn't look the same. Everything would not be okay. And so I didn't tell her, you know, I didn't object or anything like that. I just said, Mom, you know, do you want to see the body? Because Dad's not there anymore. We all believe that there's something after life. And so when Dad died, he's not in his body anymore, you know, and they're doing an autopsy right now, or will be in the next day or so. Do you want to see him before they do the autopsy? Or, I mean, are you ready to travel there right now, you know, lickety split to get there first or whatever? And she said no. And at the time, like I say, she was sort of gone mentally at the time. At 19, I had the forethought to when I was going to tell her, I was going to have to tell her that he just died from a place that's 3.5 hours away. I called my cousins that were all her age and had every one of them show up to her house and be there when I told her, because I was afraid she was going to kill herself. She was very emotional. And later, when I was talking to one of those cousins, he said it was good that I did that, because she reacted predictably, but at the same time to the next degree, to the next level that I was kind of afraid she would go to. But she had people there to help her and calm her down and keep her away from the, you know, the razor blades and stuff like that. Anyway, plans don't always go the way you think they're going to go. I had planned to be in the military for 20 years from the time that I was 8 years old. I grew up in the military, you know. Everybody I knew and admired were from the military, had either retired from the military or had a darn good reason why they didn't go that far. The only person that I knew that had been in the military that didn't go that far, I didn't respect. And it wasn't because of that, but at the same time, they were correlated. You know, the things that I didn't respect about him were things that probably would have improved with him staying in the military longer, okay? But then I was prevented by life from getting to go in, period. I got out with a general discharge and I started working. And my theory was that give it a year or so and that I'd be then able to go to an Army recruiter and boom, sign up and go. Because a general discharge doesn't prevent you from getting in again. They just got to kind of check with the people you were with and find out why you were discharged. Was it because you were a bad soldier or what? And they would have found out it was basically a hardship discharge and that there were things I had to do, you know. Problem though. A person I greatly admired and voted for twice, Bill Clinton, got into office. And in that 1 year period, he made a policy decision along with trying to do all these other things to reduce the national deficit. But one of them was to shrink the military. And at the same time, which is brilliant, he wanted to shrink the military, but keep our national readiness as high as possible. And so his plan was, which I still to this day know is brilliant, and that's why I don't hold it against anybody, was to let people cycle in when they're 17, 18, 21 years old, whatever, get trained for 4 years, and then when they, by attrition of their own volition, when they decide to go ahead and rotate out of the military to get into civilian life then, they are trained professionally. They are ready to come back when called. Even though I was out of the military, for 6 years after I was out of the military, I was on a list of people that in case of emergency, they could pull me back in no matter what I wanted to go serve in a foreign war, which is something that is normal for 6 years after everybody gets out of the military. That's the rules, at least for enlisted people. I don't know about for officers. But that way, as many people, and then so they would keep on bringing people in, but then if you got out voluntarily and then a year later decided to get back in, sorry, we're not taking people that have already been in before. No prior service people. Because their goal was to shrink the military, but at the same time get as many people as trained as possible. And the mathematical equation was that more people would join than stay. And that it would continue people joining, getting their 4 years, getting their training in. And it worked like a charm. It kept the Soviet Union, which we were still at war with in the Cold War, it kept them afraid of us. Not just our tech, because at the time their tech was as good as ours. But our numbers. Everybody that's ever played the game of Risk knows that numbers is everything. Numbers are everything. It just didn't work out for me because I didn't know that policy was coming. It hadn't been invented yet. And in that 1 year period, bad luck, it came to pass. And I was no longer allowed to go into the military. Fuck. Bad timing is everything in that case. So if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. My dad dying is not, at 50 years old, was not something I could have predicted. It 100%, it was like a kid riding a bicycle and somebody throws a stick in the spokes of the front wheel. Boo! That kicked my ass. Even though that kicked my ass, a few years later when I'm getting ready to start my plan back in shape again, this next thing, another stick in the spokes, boo! I mean, over and over and over again until I just was thrown off balance. I mean, I was thrown off balance to the point where I must have hit my head on both of those bicycle accidents. And after that, I just couldn't stand right or something. So now I'm kind of aimlessly wandering. because I planned. I mean, I devoted my life to the idea that my first 20 years of life, from the time that I was 20 or so to 40, were going to be in the military. And I would have been a great soldier, because in the National Guard, I was way above and beyond what other soldiers were. I was already maxing out my PT tests. Even though I was a soldier 2 days out of the month, I studied things that were related to my job, so that I wasn't just a weekender, so that when it came time for me to rotate into combat, if ever needed, or into the regular Army, that I would know way more about my job than my peers did. Okay. And so I became an expert in electronics. My job was not in electronics repair. My job was in a signal unit, but in a job where that I maintained the quality of the communications amongst the entire signal node. Every time anybody in the signal node had to interiorly communicate or communicate with the outside for any reason, which is all of the communication in the entire military combat, my job made sure that was all possible. That's it. And the security clearance that was issued to people with my specific job was the highest security clearance that you can get, other than special access programs. And I don't even know what they call those. My security clearance was called a TS-SCI, which is top secret. Actually, at the time, it was top secret. And then it was changed to top secret segmented compartmentalized information, which means that nobody has the whole picture. A whole big group of people, everybody only knows their little piece of the puzzle. That way, no one person could go to the Russians or the Chinese or whatever and say, hey, I'm going to tell you all of our secrets. That person could only tell you a tiny little segment. And it just made our security system much, much better than it used to be. The segmented and compartmentalized information aspect of it. When I got out, and later, after 2001 happened, the 9/11, when 9/11 happened, I decided at that time again to try to go back in. It's been many, many years since I got out. So I went to recruiters, and they said, well, same thing still applies. There's no prior service allowed, except if there's an exception now. You can volunteer to go into a Ranger unit, like a Ranger battalion, or you can volunteer to go into a Special Forces unit, which is kind of a step above Ranger unit, which is virtually impossible, by the way. The success rate of people making it through Ranger School is 60%. So there's a 60% failure rate. And those are people that are generally already in the military, and they're already in shape. Now, the good news is I had been in tremendous shape at one time, but I had taken so much time off and had so many setbacks that I just stopped caring about life. And I stopped working out and training and all that kind of stuff. And so I went back in, and I said, okay, fine. If the only way I can get back in is to go into a Ranger unit, then boom, I'll do that very thing. And so I got back into shape really, really quickly. And I still didn't end up going, but at the same time, while I was getting ready for it, they redid my security clearance, because I was going into a Ranger unit, into a signal unit that was going to be changed because my old job was gone. So it would end up being a signal intelligence unit. So they made my clearance go from top secret to top secret segmented compartmentalized information. So that was on the books. And then that security clearance was good for another 6 years. And then literally 1 week before I was supposed to finalize it, go to the MEPS and leave, sign my life away and then leave, my wife at the time said she wanted a divorce. The transition from me being the person I was when she met me to being the person I needed to be to succeed through. I had to go through another basic training, which is not a big deal, but then Ranger School, which was another whole other level. The transformation I had to make to be able to get into that was drastic, and I made it happen. I didn't do any steroids or anything like that. Not like that. I didn't road rage, but you know, I mean, at the same time, my hair was down the middle of my back. You know, I had my own business, but I was also a bouncer at a big nightclub every week and stuff, and you know, I was a very big muscular guy and all this kind of stuff, and I had this whole other persona, but I knew the old persona that I had to adopt again to be a high-speed soldier. Otherwise, I just absolutely had no chance in succeeding in Ranger School. I even switched to having a nighttime job because Ranger School is on the other side of the country. I was on the West Coast. Ranger School is on the other side of the country. So my sleep pattern at minimum had to be changed because I already had the thing stacked against me. Ranger School is something you should go through at 18 or 19 years old. And I was much older than that. So literally the recruiters in the office, there's like 8 recruiters, they were all taking bets on if I would live through Ranger School. Live, not just make it, but live through Ranger School. I was like, you motherfuckers, you know, that ain't cool. I'm signing up with you guys, and you guys are, and got to the point where I was just one of them. They all realized I had as much experience in life as they did. And when they retested me, because they were trying to find out how much of I retained from my prior time, I passed the test that they had handed me 100% with 100%. And they weren't paying attention to me at the time. And when they graded it, they're like, oh, sorry. And they were all there. They said, oh, sorry, this is not supposed to be open book. I said, I wasn't using a book. And they said, no, I mean, but you got every one of these questions right. And I said, I know. I mean, I just knew all the answers. It was a pretty extensive test, not like the ASVAB or something, but it, you know, took me 45 minutes. And they kind of huddled up like a football team and decided they would give it to me again with some changes that they personally made right there in the room. I mean, every one of them was E6 or above. And gave me the next test, and then like a bunch of people were watching me to make sure I wasn't cheating or something. And again, a lot of the test questions were the same ones I just did, and a bunch of them were new shit that they thought up that, you know, just everybody knows. And I got done. This time it was quicker because the ones I already knew I didn't have to really think about. And I passed it with 100% again. They were like, holy shit. You like remember everything. And I'm like, well, at the time I was a good soldier, you know. I was the first one that made it to E4 out of all the people that went to basic training the same exact time I did. And it's because I really gave a shit. And I studied that stuff, not just one weekend a month. I studied it every day. You know, and things that, you know, that were comparable, things, other skills that would be complement. And books written by World War II people, Vietnam people, all kinds of stuff, you know, about everything from bushcraft to, you know, to whatever. Anything that I thought that would help me through a school or that would help me, you know, in a combat situation or whatever. You know, it was just my interest. It was where I was going. I was trying to make sure that I knew all the shit I needed to know. And apparently it paid off for that little test. Well, a week before that, I had changed who I was so much, my wife decided she was not in for the ride. I had asked her many times, would it be okay? Would you mind being, you know, attached to the military? You know, being a military wife, whatever. And she had said yes or whatever, but I don't think she really understood what she was saying, I guess. And I think in that interim, she got a lot of alone time because I was running. I was getting to the point where I could run 10 miles, you know, no problem, solid. And where that I could do 200 push-ups in a minute. I mean, 200 push-ups in 2 minutes. That's a fucking big deal. I mean, anybody needs to try that if you haven't ever tried that. It's not easy. And the point where I could do 200 sit-ups in 2 minutes, you know. I was spending a lot of time not sitting on the living room couch watching TV with my wife, not going out partying to the clubs like we had always done. You know, in the 2 years we had whatever been together. We were together actually 4 years now that I think about it. So that was really trying for her to see this whole other person emerge. That's not what she signed on for, apparently, and she wanted a change. And by this time, I had already been divorced once, which had been 100% predictable also. But I chose to try to save my marriage and become the person she had signed on with and wanted to be with, and try to get rid of the person that I cut all my hair off, all that kind of stuff. But it didn't work. It was too late. You know, she had already made her mind up, and she was already cheating by that time, and I didn't know it at the time. But she'd already made her mind up. She'd already justified the cheating in her mind and stuff like that because I wasn't the same person, that basically in some way in her mind I had broken the contract, you know, by changing. So I again had put a delay on the plans to go back in the Army, and then I lost the marriage to boot, and emotionally was flattened. It was just like exactly like somebody throwing another stick in the spokes of the front wheel again, and boo, there I went. And it threw me off. Well, I really, really, really should have chosen one or the other and made one of them work for sure, you know. And once I realized one wasn't going to work, I should have just gone to the other. I really should have done that. Because, man, I can't believe I did that, to be honest. I worked so hard. But live your life for a while. Anybody that hears this, that's lived for a while, you'll know what I'm talking about. But live your life for a while. You'll find out that when you get thrown off mentally, it's not as easy to recover as it seems like it would be. You know, you're blinded, your air's cut off. It's like getting punched in the throat and kicked in the balls at the same time, you know. Mike Tyson always says that everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And I have to say, it'd be punched in the nose for me. Getting punched in the mouth would keep my plans going. Getting punched in the nose, that might make me change my plans. I've had my nose broke 3 times, to be honest. So I understand how that works. So cut yourself some slack. Still Working It Out is the title of my channel, and that's because, man, my life has just been one rug pulled out from me after another. And I diligently make new plans, and then have to make new plans, and then have to make new plans, but I never failed to not give up. You know, after I got my bell rung, I'd shake it off, and I would get up and go again, you know. I did box in my life. When I said I had 3 broken noses, one of them were from fighting. And the other 2 were from getting hit by gloves. And I was never good at, and believe me, I got my bell rung. I never got knocked out. I plenty of times got knocked down and like seeing stars kind of a thing, but then was getting up maybe even late, but never got knocked out. But one thing I was not good at was giving up. One thing I was not give up, and that, which is hilarious because that used to be the joke around the gym, was that there are times you need to just stay the fuck down, but you can't seem to do that. It's not in you, and the truth is, it's not. You know, I've never been that way. I've never been able to give up, and thank goodness, because one time in the early 90s, I had a 45 and I stuck that 45 in my mouth, and I was I was in such pain at that moment with things that I had been going through, and then just this one new thing felt like the straw on the last straw on the camel's back. And I was just so done. I was just so done with life. It just sucked. There was no reward, you know. At the end, the light at the end of the tunnel kept on being a train, you know. And, you know, I had tears in my eyes and a gun at my mouth at the same time. And I knew how to off myself. It wasn't a question of, you know, fucking it up. It would have been lights out. That would have been it. you know. But I realized suddenly, I had a flash, you know, of like my mom and my sister and brother, and as confusing as life was for them already, it would only be made worse if I did that. And it would be something that would be forever for them. You know, they would always look back on with pain. Not just my dad's death, but me too. And I took the gun out of my mouth, I decocked it, put it back in its holster, and moved the fuck on. I almost gave up on myself. I almost pussed out on life. Lazily and cowardly would have been given up. So don't do that. Remember, the impact that we have on the world can be bad. It can be. It can be tremendously good for as long as you're alive, and then even longer if you have kids and if you train your kids well. It can last forever and ever and ever, your impact on the world. If you kill yourself, it's not going to ever have a good impact on the world. It can only have a bad impact on the world. So don't let it happen. Don't give up on yourself. Life is, to me, life is finite, you know. Even though I 100% believe in reincarnation, because it makes sense to me, you know. Things are reincarnated in front of us all the time. You know, plants die, come back, die, come back. You know, concepts are reincarnated. You know, they are lost, and then somebody else discovers it again. You can take a mathematical equation, completely destroy its record. Eventually, somebody else is going to come across it again, and then that's reincarnated. You know. So, life is good if you let it be good, if you pay attention to the good stuff, you know. We're all pretty lucky. Look at it. Look how we are in America compared to how they are in some South African countries. I mean, we're not suffering like they are, you know. We're concerned about our rulership and our government being unfair or whatever the case may be. And a lot of it is corrupt, you know, and things like that. But my gosh, look at some of the dictatorships around the world that, I mean, even in Russia, that's not a third world country at all. But they live in a third world regime that is nothing more than a dictatorship, you know. The problem is it's a very powerful dictatorship. We're really lucky here. And life is full of beauty. And you sometimes got to look at that. You got to examine where you've been and remember any of the suffering you've ever done. And remember, we're not doing that now. You know, we've seen worse than this. That means if we've seen worse than this, there's such a thing as better than this too, right? That's called balance. By the way, I always mean to do this in these videos, and I'm not getting anything out of it. It's just because I love the product. My little brother, Jerry Underwood, and his wife have a company called Guatemalan Gold Coffee. Guatemalan Gold Coffee. And my brother married a Guatemalan lady who was living in the U.S. and a citizen. Her father is just for generations now, has been a Guatemalan coffee taster by trade for his whole life. And he's a man older than me, where that he would go around to all the different farms and, you know, check out their green uncured beans, then check out their roasting processes and sample their coffee in the way he could make it right then and there, so he'd know he's made properly and stuff. And he would choose the best coffees for other companies that are looking for coffee to say, you need to buy a certain amount or whatever they've got in this particular crop for your company. So my little brother found out about this and he said, hey, let's start a company of our own. And like tongue in cheek, they decided to call it Guatemalan Gold. And the reason is because his wife's father's last name is Escobar. And it was just sort of, my little brother was the same security clearance as mine, but in the Navy. And so there was always these top secret things, these vettings he had to do before he could get married to his wife. She had to be vetted. And then her father kind of had to be vetted. Their last name, how closely were they associated with the Escobars, And it turns out there's more than one family with the name Escobar. So anyway, the company's called Guatemalan Gold. It's some of the finest coffee I've ever had in my life because it's straight up being sorted by one of the highest quality, skilled people in the entire industry. And so it's a fantastic company. I highly recommend looking up Guatemalan Gold. I get the medium roast. That's just because that's what I like. But they sell all the different roasts. And you can get it in subscription either. And I always get the whole bean because I have a burr grinder, which is the best kind. And I've even done the pour over thing, with like the special pot and all that kind of stuff. But I find my Mr. Coffee makes it just as well. I mean, if I had a palate like a dog has a nose, maybe I'd be able to tell the difference. But frankly, I can definitely tell the difference between like Folgers and Guatemalan Gold. Guatemalan Gold coffee is some of the finest coffee I've ever had. It's right up there with Jamalia. And, even then, there's too many flavors of Jamalia coffee. I can't find the one I've had once before that was better than this. I don't know what happened to it. I cannot find it. I've tried. But I highly recommend looking up online, Guatemalan Gold, and ordering a bag of whole bean coffee, and give whatever kind of, whether it's French roast or whatever you like the best, give it a try. But mine's medium roast, and treat yourself. It's not as expensive as you think. It's actually not more expensive than regular coffee. My brother's a smart guy. Him and his wife both are smart. And they live in Colorado, so they source the coffee right out of Guatemala. It's all hand sourced by my brother's father-in-law and his sons. Give it a shot. Guatemalan Gold coffee. And I don't make any money from this. That's just my favor to my little brother. And it's also my favor to you because I think coffee is manna from heaven. Coffee is that's the closest thing I could ever have to religion right there is coffee. So that was my one plug. I have another recommendation for you, and it's not really a plug because I don't get anything out of it either, but it's a source of happiness and interest for me. It's a podcast called Moonshots with Peter Diamandis. So it's Moonshots. If you're a person thirsty for knowledge and are really interested in the tech world and where AI is going and what's next in AI or quantum computing and all this kind of stuff, things are changing so rapidly right now by the week. There was a post by those guys yesterday that talked about a Sputnik level event. A company out of China called Kimi K3 just produced an AI that was at the level far beyond anything we've seen before. And not only at the level of that, but at 1,000 times cheaper than anything else comparatively. So the idea is when it comes time for it to be a thing that you would pay for, it would be, pennies on the dollar compared to everything else, which is exactly what's going to happen with AI one day, and especially if you start paying attention to their podcast called Moonshots with Peter Diamandis. Highly recommend it. You guys will love it. And I've got more stuff to share, but I took a bunch of time wandering, so I'm not going to share anything else. I'll repost another time. So anyway, it's been an hour, just like 5 minutes over that. So you guys have a great day. Don't give up on yourselves. I love every one of you guys. every person that's watching my stuff, remember this: you're lovable. You know, you're admirable. Even if you've got problems. I have serious ADHD. A few years ago, when I was 50 years old, I found out I had developed multiple sclerosis. It stopped my working life completely. And it took me a few years to figure out how to change gears on that and still stay productive. And it took 6 years of college then to develop that. And then a few more months of some other training and stuff. And within a month or so, I'm going to start driving truck for Prime, probably over the road, to save up for 5 years to launch a business that I've already started, but that I need money to launch for the marketing factor. That's me planning stuff out, but you can do it too. I admire you guys. Please like and subscribe on this, but the most important thing you could possibly do, if you like me at all, is to comment. Tell me who you are. Tell me your name. Tell me where you're from, and give me a suggestion. Even if that suggestion is to fuck off, I promise I'll try for you, because I'll owe you that if you comment. All right, I appreciate it. You guys have a great day, and thanks for tuning in. Have a good one.